There are 2 deer in the forest. It is the time of winter, and the couple seems to be away from their herd. Unusually, though, they don't seem to be lost at all. As the male gets near the female, it almost feels like he wants to show true human affection. It's almost like a dream. When the sun comes up over the horizon, the main characters of our story are introduced. Endre is the financial director of a slaughterhouse in Budapest. His entire left hand is dangling from his left shoulder lifelessly. Maria is a quality inspector, and today is going to be her first day at Endre's slaughterhouse. Both seem to be reserved, and both seem to love the first rays of the sun. Sitting in his office in the next scene, Endre catches a glimpse of her for the first time, and notices something unusual about her right away. The girl is standing in a shadow. Well, she is mostly covered in shadow. Only the tips of her feet are touched by the sun. Slowly, as if she didn't want anybody else to see, she drags her feet back. Now it is all perfect. Later that day, Endre is dining with his coworker and a true macho, whose name we do not know. The man is talking about how one should control his wife and have her on a leash, but when his wife comes up to him, he starts chirping quite differently. It's almost as if the marks of a leash are visible on his neck, rather than on his wife's. As he informs Endre, the new quality inspector is quite strict and unfriendly. To demonstrate it, he calls her to join them at the table. Without communicating back, Maria averts her eyes and sits elsewhere alone. Endre prefers not to jump to conclusions yet. Saying goodbye to his alpha friend, he approaches Maria and sits with her. In his eyes, the girl seems lonely and afraid. This is exactly why he's here now, and this is exactly why he chose the most ordinary subject to discuss. Maria is overly official. That much is true. Her expressions are dry, and her social skills are close to zero, but deep down, she seems to be a warm, pleasant person. Even though Endre is well informed that Maria doesn't like to be called Marika, he addresses her in that way on purpose to see her reaction. The dissatisfaction is obvious, but Maria is reserved enough to communicate this feeling politely. It's interesting why Endre chose to test her at this moment. Later that night, Maria reenacts this exact conversation on her perfectly arranged kitchen table. Maria is played by a salt container, and Endre is played by the pepper one. The memory of this dialogue must be perfectly folded and put inside the drawers of her imagination. The dream is of the forest again. Beautiful and serene, the tranquil area is tread by deer once more. When the morning comes, we get a glimpse into what the other employees think about the new inspector. Naturally, as with most of the inspectors, she isn't loved at all. In her case, however, her position has little to do with this attitude. The workers of the slaughterhouse find her personality displeasing because she mainly refers to herself and addresses others coldly. She's like a shy koala, infinitely unsocial and extremely attentive to details. People almost fear her. After the normal day at the slaughterhouse is shown, we arrive at Endre's office, where he interviews one of his new employees. After the ordinary stuff, he asks him a very interesting question. He wants to know what this muscular, careless man thinks of the cattle that are slaughtered here. Without giving it any special thought, the man immediately answers that he doesn't care. He's okay with blood, and the fact that animals perish for his food doesn't bother him at all. This is not a great answer for Endre. After hearing this, he lets him know that he should find another job. With this mindset, he will have a breakdown in no time, so this is just friendly advice from an old man who has been working here for a long time. Within the course of this interesting interview, Endre's phone rings, and the person on the other side of the line lets him know that the new inspector is labeling their best cattle as Grade B. This is a problem that must be addressed by Endre. As we remember, their last concert went great, so this one will most likely be a total delight for both too. As expected, the dialogue is strictly professional in the next scene. Without beating around the bush, Endre jumps, cuts to the chase right away, and smiling, asks her about the reason she's grading everything B. As Maria answers, she is working according to the regulations. She has strict guidelines, and for the guidelines, even the smallest details matter. Endre is defeated here. He has no choice but to finish up the conversation. As always, he sleeps on his couch in front of a TV that night. Slowly, as he dozes off, snowflakes start falling in his mind. The dream comes, and with it, the image of the forest. The ordinary day comes at the slaughterhouse then. As always, Maria comes on time, and as always, she creeps everybody out with her motionlessness and emotionlessness. As she enters the dining room, people around her seem to freeze. The laughter stops, and in the blink of an eye, even the process of eating becomes a professional endeavor. In the next scene, Endre and his friend are discussing a small problem about the night shift when, suddenly, they notice something unusual happening outside. As it seems, some members of the staff have already started to pick on the new inspector. They are making fun of her, but Maria appears to have no tools to fight back. That night, after an ordinarily tiring day, the deer heard a noise by the stream. The silence of the winter forest is so all-encompassing that even a slight noise from a bird nearby sounds ominous. Here, after drinking fresh water from the stream, the male and female cross the water and walk away. The next morning, police arrived at the slaughterhouse. As it turns out, a mating powder was stolen from the medicine cabinet. Naturally, Idri wants this encounter to be over as quickly as possible. The investigator, however, doesn't seem to like a rush. As he advises, the slaughterhouse should conduct an annual screening of the staff's mental health now. It will most likely give him a lot of insights about the case. What is most insightful for Andre in the next scene, however, is the psychologist's bosom. Being as attentive as any psychologist, the woman notices the direction of Andre's sight immediately, of course. She points it out right away and asks him about his first ejaculation ever. Naturally, the man thinks that she is punishing him for not knowing where to take his eyes, but the woman is actually interested. This is something she will ask everyone on the staff. Afterward, she tells him to remember his dream. This is also the question that will be asked of anyone. After the image of the two deer is conveyed to her, the psychologist gets interested in whether they made it or not. Edry gets frustrated now. If only he could travel back in time and meet that Freud person, he would show him. No, it is true that in the dream, Endre was a stag, but he didn't mate with the female. They merely touched their noses while drinking water from the stream. Compared to him, Maria answers all questions with inhumane precision. She doesn't seem to have any problems with deeply personal or sexual matters. What she does object to, however, is the inattentiveness of the tired psychologist. This latter problem is soon taken care of. When Maria tells her all about her dream, the woman becomes immediately energized. Getting Andre's files and checking his dream, she realizes that they are exactly the same. The only difference is that in the dream, Maria is the doe, while Andre is the stag. Exhausted from the countless interviews, the psychologist thinks that she is being picked on. And so, believing that the staff is making fun of her by making up matching dreams, she asks Maria to leave. Later that evening, both Maria and Andre are called to the psychologist's office again. Andre is highly vigilant and frustrated, but Maria seems to be as reserved and calmly attentive as always. Being the best psychologist and a key holder of people's minds and souls, the woman still thinks that their dream is fake. She still believes that she's been lied to, and Andre starts wondering if she has overworked herself. It is in this moment that the voice recording is put on by the psychologist, and it is in this moment that the duo learns about their matching dreams. At first, they just think that it's funny. To be more precise, Andre thinks that it is only an unusual coincidence and nothing more. Only God knows what Maria is thinking. Still, she smiles and agrees that their having this shared dream is funny. Well, they should ask the psychoanalysts and see how they think it's funny. The rest of the evening passes ordinarily for both, but their shared dream is when things start to become more exciting. This time, the doe and the stag appear on the facing banks of a small round pond. Gazing at each other, they hear a sound coming from the forest. As always, their sight contains an unusual amount of consciousness. The next day at dinner, Maria sits with Andre. It is the first time she has ever decided to eat with someone else. Naturally, she wants to know what he dreamt of last night, but unfortunately, Andre chooses to lie about it. Something about this matching dream must be terrifying him unconsciously. Since the dream won't be discussed, Maria stands up and leaves to eat alone, and Andre's friend joins him for dinner instead. The conversation with him is so boring, and the feeling of regret for lying is so strong for the director that he fails to listen to his friend. Later that day, he approaches Maria and tells her the truth. Of course, Maria had the same dream as well. This is not a joke anymore. It can no longer be regarded as a mere coincidence. Perhaps the best way to move forward for Andre would be not to believe Maria in this situation. All hail to the defense mechanisms. That night, the stag gets inside the dense forest after the doe, and they run together between the trees. The sun shines brightly in the morning as both Maria and Andre wake up at the same time. The man does something new here. He writes down his dream and, at work, shows it to the inspector. He asks Maria to do the same as well, and after she is finished, they swap the letters with each other to see if they match. A bright smile appears on Maria's face after she reads Andre's dream. There is no question about it now. There is an undeniable magical bond between them. They share something very intimate. In a gigantic and unmapped world of the unconscious, they are together, acting as lanterns in the dark. During dinner time that day, their conversation is interrupted by the young man who made fun of Maria earlier. His name seems to be Salvador. Once Andre leaves, he tries to flirt with the inspector, but does this with an underlying disrespect. The financial director peeks at them from afar. This seems to be frustrating him a lot. To do something about this frustration, he offers Maria to drink some coffee later that evening. He tells Maria not to take Sandor seriously, and asks her about the subject of their conversation. But the woman doesn't share anything. Silence falls, and to brush it off quickly, Endre asks her for her phone number. This is only for work-related purposes, of course, but Maria responds that she doesn't have a phone. Endre is taken aback. Thinking that she's lying, he gets frustrated again, and containing his dissatisfaction, tells her that he didn't mean to impose. The next day, Maria is in a very colorful room with her psychologist. To be more precise, the man isn't her psychologist anymore. He only works with children, and has worked with Maria in the past as well. The girl seems to feel safe with him, and this is why she came here to talk about what happened last evening. She really doesn't have a phone, but what she seems to have is a psychological condition. So far, we can only guess what it is, but it is clearly making Maria's social life very difficult. Before going to sleep that night, Maria reenacts her last conversation with Endre using toys. In this moment, we get a glimpse into what she truly felt during that interaction, and what she truly feels about Endre. She knows that the man is jealous and frustrated. She also knows that he's insecure about his physical body, mainly for his left hand. She wants to tell him that he's beautiful, that she doesn't care about Sandor at all, and that on the contrary, she's afraid of him. Oh, and most importantly, she really doesn't have a phone. If only things could go back to being normal again. Perhaps exactly for this reason, Maria approaches Endre in the cafeteria in the next scene and emphasizes that she's buying a new phone tomorrow. She also tells him that he's beautiful. There you go. Everything is as normal as it gets now. After having a conversation with the detective later that day, Endre is approached by Salvador. He wants to know details about the investigation, but of course, he won't get any of it from Endre. The man despised him for many reasons. Additionally, as he shares this moment, he knows it was Salvador who stole the mating powder. The night before sleep and the morning afterward are lonely, as always, for both Maria and Endre. In the next scene, the latter is talking with his daughter when Maria gives him a call for the first time. As it turns out, she has already bought her new phone and wants to use it accordingly. During the brief but exciting call, she offers him to give her a call tonight. They could fall asleep together and enter the realm of dreams at the same time. It is a great idea, and Endre would love to do it. The day passes by ordinarily, but the night promises something new and unseen. Maria is waiting vigilantly for the call in the next scene when her phone finally rings. From the other side of the line, Endre lets her know that he has already taken his sleeping pill and is now going to bed. Before he hands up, however, he wants to convey something meaningful to her. He cannot really put it into words properly, but he wants her to know that he's not dangerous. He is safe, and she should not be afraid of him. Well, it doesn't really come out naturally, but Maria gets his point, and she appreciates it. As we already know, a huge majority of their relationship happens in sleep. As doe and stag, they have been treading the winter forest for a long time, but tonight is something else. They have never felt so great after sleeping. During dinner that day, as both their faces are illuminated by some internal light, Endre invites her on a date. Of course, the invitation is accepted. In the next scene, the psychologist lets Endre know about her conclusion. After many days of rigorous evaluation, she is almost completely sure that the mating powder was stolen by an HR manager. Before leaving, she asks the financial director about her dreams again. After all, she's a psychologist, and she knows that if Endre and Maria really have a shared dream, it means a lot. Unfortunately, Endre decides to lie at this moment. He tells the woman that the dream thing was a foolish joke, and he apologizes for it. Unusually enough, this isn't the last lie he says today. Once the psychologist leaves, his friend and a coworker enter his office to learn about the conclusion. Endre lets him know that it was Salvador who stole it. As it turns out, his desire to fire the man is really strong. Unfortunately, however, he won't be getting a chance to fulfill his wish today. The friend lets him know about a secret. It was he who stole it. Naturally, the man awaits being fired, but Endre simply tells him not to do it again. The police will eventually drop the case, and nobody will find out. Later that day, the financial director does something unusual. He walks out to Salvador, asks for an apology, and offers to have some beer together. In the next scene, Maria receives a lesson on seduction from a cleaning lady. The old woman seems to be quite proficient in it. She's quick to evaluate Maria's physical possibilities, and she gives out a perfect lesson in movement and posing. Endre takes Maria to his old favorite place then. This is when his old age first becomes obvious. The place is now a mess, nobody visits it, and the service is as bad as it gets. Perhaps this is why we see the couple at another place in the next scene. The old lady's lesson must have been really productive since Andre came up with the idea to sleep together tonight. He doesn't mean anything serious, he simply wants to sleep in one room with her, so Maria shouldn't be so nervous. It is easier said than done, however. That night, as they go to bed together, both fail to fall asleep. It is true that they feel comfortable with each other in their dreams, but to fall asleep together is another business. This is why they spend the entire night playing cards. Thanks to Maria's extreme attentiveness and abnormally developed memory, she wins everything, of course. It is when she tries to explain this aspect of her personality that suddenly Andre reaches over the table to touch her arm. All he wants is to show some simple and warm affection, but Maria's hand throws itself backward immediately. The movement is so abrupt and reactive that Andre is left feeling embarrassed. Until he met Maria, he thought that the chapter of women had been closed in his life forever, but sitting in front of her now, he wants to reopen it again. This isn't something he is proud of, or something that he finds extremely satisfying. This is simply what his heart wants. As we already know, this is something that Maria's heart also wants. Physical contact, however, is something alien to her body. The condition she is living with makes that aspect of life extremely hard for her. To touch something and be touched is almost impossible for her. This is why it was the hand throwing itself backward that morning, and not Maria throwing it back herself. To tackle this issue, Maria addresses ordinary and obvious methods at first, but soon she feels that they are not working. This is when she goes to her old psychologist again. As we already know, the man only works with children, so Maria's struggle with sex life is completely outside his comfort zone. That being said, he still manages to give her some fantastic advice. First of all, she should practice psychological intimacy in some way. She could get a pet or dress herself to get accustomed to her psychological being. She can also use music to get in the mood. Music always helps. The easiest thing to start with is, of course, the latter. This is why, in the next scene, Maria listens to countless CDs at a music shop. The employees there have never seen something like this. A girl remaining still while listening to countless albums. She must really be determined to find the perfect one. In the end, just before the shop is closed, the worker girl asks what her purpose is and learns that she is just looking for a good love song. Ask, and it will be given to you. The sorrowful, bittersweet song enters the story most magnificently that night. It is so strong, and it paints everything in such meaningful colors that Maria fails to take it all the way to the end. Perhaps this is the first time she is learning about the immeasurable power of music. As the love of her life struggles to eat food in the next scene, Maria continues her practice, but Andre doesn't know about it. Thinking that his love and affection are rejected, he leaves his house in frustration. The antler is all alone in the next scene, looking for his doe through the forest. He runs like there's no tomorrow, but his other half is nowhere to be found. The next morning, Maria's sensory journey continues. She pets cattle at work, visits a meadow in the afternoon, and buys a fluffy toy. For the first time, she realizes now that a touch can cause immense and irresistible joy, a strong but satisfying bodily sensation. Everything seems to be going very well with her, but unfortunately, the same cannot be said about Andre. Still feeling alone and rejected, he soothes his pain in the most unhelpful ways possible. After spending that night with some woman from his past, he fails to sleep at all. The next morning, Maria finally manages to make the difficult move. Having seen his condition, we know that it is not the best time for this, but unfortunately, Maria has no idea about this. Feeling as hopeful and excited as ever, she lets him know that she's ready to try sleeping with him again. Her face is bright, and everything about her waits for a positive answer, but sadly enough, her hopes of safe intimacy are shattered. The man rejects her politely and offers nothing but friendship. Asking him out was difficult enough, but enduring this disappointment was almost impossible for the girl. As Andre reflects on his decision that night, Maria prepares something extremely dramatic. Readying the bath, she brings her CD player into the bathroom and gets a piece of shattered glass. It isn't necessary to describe in detail the thing that she is about to do. The bittersweet love song is turned on, and the bath starts filling with red. The end is already near, and the tragic end of the story seems inevitable, when suddenly the CD player stops working. Trouble enters the world, and when Maria decides to go with it anyway, she hears her phone ringing. This ringtone is a hope for life, the proof that there is still something to fight for. So immediately, Maria gets up to follow it. When she answers, Andre sparks an ordinary conversation. At any second, Maria can pass out. She must call him for help. She must tell him that her end is near, but instead, she patiently listens to the man and asks ordinary questions. It is when he says goodbye, and Maria moves the phone away from her ear, that suddenly the man says the first significant word. He says that he is sorry, and following up, confesses his immeasurable love for her. The thrilling moment is over. Andra says he's eager for love and offers to meet her tonight. After hanging up, Maria tries her best to stop the bleeding. She was also eager for love, so before visiting Andre, she had to go to the hospital. Fortunately, her wound was treated and she is all right. In fact, she is more than all right. That night, after their first intimate contact, Maria and Andra fall asleep. Surprisingly enough, they dream of nothing at all.